I'm Dana Coleman, 34 years old, sitting in my new office that rainy morning in Huntsville, Alabama, when the door burst open. My parents and sister stood there, desperation etched on their faces. "We need you to save our company." My mother begged, her voice, shaky hands clasped tight. My sister, arms crossed, glared like I owed her something. My father avoided my eyes as usual. Starlight Farms. The family business I built with my own hands was crumbling, and they thought I'd fix their mess. For years I slaved away creating the formula that made it a name, only to be shoved aside, labeled the lab girl, while they crowned my sister the star. Now, with everything falling apart, they came crawling back. "Dana, you're our only shot." My mother pressed, stepping closer. I leaned back, letting their words hang in the air. I could have saved them. I could have pulled them out of the fire. But the sting of their dismissal, years of being invisible, hit harder than their pleas. "You're too late," I said, my voice cold, final. Their eyes widened, realizing I held something they couldn't touch. What was it? Stick around to see how I let their empire burn. Drop a comment with where you're watching from and hit that like button to dive deeper into this family drama. To understand why I refused, you need to know how I grew up. In Huntsville, Alabama, our family home was a modest brick house, but inside it was a stage for favoritism. My mother, Margaret Coleman, ruled with a sharp voice and sharper priorities. My father, Richard Coleman, trailed behind her, always agreeing without question. My sister, Allison Coleman, 4 years older, was their shining star, the one they believed would carry the family legacy. I was the shadow, fighting for a sliver of their attention. As a kid, I saw the gap widen early. Allison got sent to Crestwood Academy, a private school with polished classrooms and teachers who fawned over her. I was stuck at Huntsville High, a public school where the science lab had outdated microscopes and broken beakers. "Allison needs the best education," my mother said when I asked why I couldn't go. "You'll manage." Her words stung, but I buried the hurt, vowing to prove I was more than manageable. The worst came when I was 15. I'd spent months on a science fair project designing a way to preserve fruit without chemicals, a spark of my future career. I won a $5,000 scholarship, my ticket to a better future. I thought my parents would finally see me. But at dinner, my mother announced, "We're using the scholarship for Allison's summer program in Paris." My father nodded, not meeting my eyes. Allison just smiled like it was her right. "It's an investment in the family," my mother added, dismissing my protests. I clutched the scholarship certificate, feeling it crumble in my heart as much as in my hands. That night, I locked myself in my room, anger replacing tears. I swore I'd never beg for their validation again. It wasn't just the money, it was the message that my achievements were less than Allison's. I threw myself into school, staying late to study chemistry, learning from textbooks when teachers fell short. I wasn't going to let their choices break me. The only one who ever truly saw me was my grandfather, Lewis Coleman. Before he passed away when I was 16, he'd sit me down in his dusty workshop, teaching me to tinker with old kitchen tools and gadgets. "You've got a knack for solving things, Dana," he'd say, his voice warm with belief. His death left a void. Those memories became my anchor, pushing me to keep going when my family pushed me down. By high school, I was carving my own path. I got a job at a local market, stacking shelves to save for college. Allison, meanwhile, was off at social events or internships my parents secured for her. "She's making connections," my father said, as if my hours studying meant nothing. I stopped arguing, stopped expecting them to notice. The constant dismissal, being told I wasn't as important, lit a fire in me. I wasn't just fighting for recognition, I was fighting to become someone they couldn't ignore. That drive, born from years of being overlooked, shaped everything I'd become. After graduating with a degree in food chemistry, I returned to Huntsville to work for Starlight Farms. At that time, I was 24, eager to put my skills to use. Starlight Farms, our family's small organic dried fruit business, was barely breaking even in a tough market. I saw an opportunity to change that. I dove into the lab, spending months blending and testing recipes for raisins, dried apricots, and apple slices. I developed a drying process that locked in flavor without chemicals, a game changer. 2 years later, our products were crisp, vibrant, and unmatched. Green Essence Markets. A national chain came calling, wanting to stock our goods. Starlight Farms went from obscure to a brand customers loved, and I was the driving force behind it. But my mother, who ran the company with an unyielding hand, never gave me credit. "Nice work, Dana, but stick to the lab," she'd say, cutting me off in meetings. I'd share data our sales doubled because of my formula, and she'd barely acknowledge it, pivoting to talk about branding or expansion. My father sat quietly, signing her orders, offering me only a faint nod when I sought his support. It felt like my work was just a footnote in their vision. When I was 27, my mother made my sister a manager. Allison, with her smooth talk and endless charm, knew nothing about production. She thrived at trade shows, schmoozing clients while I perfected our products in the lab. "Allison's a born leader," my mother proclaimed at a team meeting, her voice brimming with pride. I clenched my jaw, holding back my frustration. Allison's first move was a costly rebrand, gaudy packaging that baffled our loyal customers. When I warned it was draining our budget, she scoffed. "Focus on your recipes, Dana," she said, her tone sharp enough to cut. My mother nodded in agreement, saying, "Allison knows how to reach people," as if my efforts didn't. I kept pushing forward, refining the formula to make our apricots softer, our raisins richer. Sales climbed higher, and Green Essence sent emails raving about the quality that kept shoppers hooked. But every time I highlighted our growth, my mother credited Allison's vision. Once she even implied Allison had guided my work. "She's the face of Starlight," my mother said, as if my sleepless nights in the lab were invisible. I'd return to my workspace, my chest tight, feeling like an outsider in the company I'd built. The disregard was relentless. During a Green Essence visit, I prepared to showcase our new apple chip recipe. My mother interrupted, pushing Allison forward to speak for the family. Allison fumbled through questions about our process while I stood in the corner, my notes useless. My father, as always, said nothing. I started questioning if they even understood my role. The more I elevated Starlight Farms, the more they sidelined me, but I refused to quit. That formula, that success was mine, and no matter how much they dismissed me, I was determined to make my mark undeniable. Everything fell apart on a Monday morning in my mother's office. I was 32, and I'd been at Starlight Farms for 8 years, my work turning it into a brand people loved. My mother called me, and her face set in that familiar, unyielding way. My father was there as usual, sitting quietly in the corner. My sister stood by my mother's desk, her posture smug, like she already knew what was coming. I expected a routine meeting, maybe about new orders from Green Essence Markets. Instead, my mother dropped a bombshell. "We've decided to pass Starlight Farms to Allison," she announced, her voice firm. "She's the leader this company needs." Then she looked at me, her eyes cold. "Dana, you're a technical asset, not a decision maker." The words hit like a slap. A technical asset. I'd spent years building Starlight Farms, crafting the formula that made our dried fruit a hit. I opened my mouth to protest, but my mother raised a hand. "This isn't up for debate," she said. I turned to my father, hoping for a shred of support. He just looked away, his silence louder than any words. Allison didn't even try to hide her smirk. "It's the right move, Dana," she said, her tone dripping with superiority. I felt my chest tighten, the weight of their betrayal sinking in. They weren't just dismissing my work. They were erasing me from the company I'd built. I couldn't stay quiet. I doubled our revenue. I said, my voice shaking but steady. My formula brought in Green Essence. I worked nights, weekends, perfecting every batch. "And you're calling me a technical asset?" I listed every milestone, sales spiking, customer praise, awards we'd won. My mother didn't flinch. "Allison is the future of this company," she said, cutting me off. "You do well in the lab, But leadership isn't your place. Allison nodded as if my contributions were just a stepping stone for her glory. My father muttered, "It's for the best, Dana." His first words of the meeting weak and hollow. I stood there, my hands clenched, years of being overlooked flashing through my mind. This wasn't just about the company. It was about my family choosing Allison over me again. I'd given everything to Starlight Farms, and they were handing it to someone who barely understood it. I made a choice right then. "If that's how you see me," I said, staring at my mother, "then I'm done." Her eyes widened, but I didn't wait for a response. I walked out, my heart pounding, knowing I couldn't stay where I was invisible. Back in my lab, I sat at my desk, the weight of my decision settling in. I wasn't just walking away from Starlight Farms, I was protecting what was mine. My formula, the heart of the company's success, was my creation. I'd spent years refining it, and I wasn't about to let them take it. I contacted a lawyer that afternoon, starting the process to copyright my drying technique. It was a legal shield, ensuring they couldn't use it without me. Every night that week, I stayed late documenting my work, securing every detail. By Friday, I submitted my resignation letter, leaving no room for negotiation. I'm leaving Starlight Farms. I wrote, my pen steady despite the ache in my chest. Effective immediately. Walking out of that building for the last time felt like shedding a weight I'd carried for years. I didn't know what came next, but I knew one thing: I was done letting them define my worth. My mother thought Allison was the future, but I held the key to Starlight Farm's success. They'd learn that soon enough. Right after I submitted my resignation, Timothy Holt called. He was the regional manager at Green Essence Markets, the chain that had championed Starlight Farm's dried fruit for years. "Dana, we've seen what you can do," he said, his voice steady over the phone. "We want you to join us as head of product development." I froze, gripping my phone, the weight of the past 8 years at Starlight Farms flashing through my mind. This wasn't just a job offer. It was a chance to be seen, to lead, to matter. I accepted on the spot, my heart racing with a mix of nerves and excitement. 2 weeks later, I walked into Green Essence's sleek Huntsville office, my new workplace. The space buzzed with energy, open desks, whiteboards scribbled with ideas, and a team that greeted me with respect, not dismissal. For the first time, I wasn't the lab girl or the overlooked daughter. Timothy, a sharp but approachable man in his late 30s, walked me through my role. "Your formula changed the game for Starlight," he said, handing me a stack of project briefs. "Now let's build something even bigger." I dove in, sketching out plans for new organic snacks, my ideas flowing without fear of being shut down. Every meeting, my voice was heard, my work valued. I was building a career on my terms, and it felt like coming up for air after years underwater. That same week, I met up with Joyce Reed, my best friend from college, over coffee. Joyce, always blunt and fiercely loyal, had followed my struggles at Starlight Farms. When I told her about my resignation and the copyright on my formula, her eyes lit up. "You're a genius for protecting that recipe," she said, stirring her latte. "Starlight's going to crash without it." "Allison doesn't know the first thing about production." Joyce's words hit home. She'd always believed in me, even when my family hadn't. "Keep that copyright tight," she urged. "They'll come crawling back when they realize what they've lost." I nodded, feeling a spark of vindication. Securing that copyright wasn't just about protecting my work, it was about reclaiming my power. At Green Essence, I started training a new team, a group of young chemists and food scientists eager to learn. I stood at the front of the lab, explaining my drying techniques, watching their faces light up with curiosity. It was a stark contrast to the years of being sidelined at Starlight. I shared my process for balancing flavor and shelf life, guiding them through experiments with mango slices and cranberries. One afternoon, a team member nailed a new recipe, and I clapped, genuinely thrilled. "That's the kind of thinking we need," I said, and they beamed. Leading felt natural, like I'd been waiting my whole life for this moment. For the first time, I felt free, not just from my family's shadow, but from the doubt they'd planted in me. As weeks turned into months, I settled into my role, my confidence growing with every project. Green Essence's shelves began stocking our new products, and customers raved about the quality. Timothy praised my work in front of the team, calling me the heart of our innovation. Each nod of approval, each successful launch, chipped away at the years of being invisible. I wasn't just surviving, I was thriving. Joyce's prediction about Starlight Farms lingered in my mind, but I didn't dwell on it. I'd spent too long fighting for their approval. Now I was focused on building something new, something mine where my worth was undeniable. 1 year later, on a rainy day, my mother, my father, and Allison showed up at my office. I was settled at Green Essence Markets, my career thriving. The sight of them standing in my doorway, soaked and desperate, took me back to that moment they'd begged me to save Starlight Farms. But this time, their faces carried a heavier weight: panic, not just pleading. My mother stepped forward, her usual confidence gone. "Dana, we're in trouble," she said, her voice breaking. "Starlight Farms is bankrupt." Allison avoided my eyes, her arms crossed tightly. My father just stood there, his shoulders slumped, silent as ever. I leaned back in my chair, letting the words sink in. Starlight Farms. The company I'd built with my formula had collapsed under Allison's mismanagement. Joyce, my college friend, had warned me this would happen. Months earlier, she'd stumbled across financial discrepancies in Starlight's public records, overstated profits, unpaid suppliers, and questionable expenses tied to Allison's lavish marketing campaigns. "It's a mess," Joyce had told me over dinner, her voice firm. I reported it to the state's Financial Oversight Board. They're investigating. She'd been right to act. Allison's reckless spending had pushed the company to the edge, and now it was falling. My mother's eyes searched mine. "We need your help, Dana," she said. "We'll give you a stake in the company, equal ownership." Allison finally spoke, her voice strained. "You know the business better than anyone," she said, almost wincing. My father added, "Please, Dana, we're family." Their promises felt hollow, a last-ditch effort to save themselves. I stayed calm, my hands folded on my desk. "Why should I help?" I asked, my tone even. "You made it clear I was just a technician, not a leader." My mother flinched, but Allison's face hardened. "That was a mistake," she muttered, barely audible. Then I dropped the truth. "The formula you've been using since I left, it's mine," I said, my voice steady. "I copyrighted it before I walked out. Every batch you produced was a violation." Their eyes widened, the reality hitting them. Starlight Farms had been coasting on my work, ignoring the legal protections I'd put in place. My lawyer had already sent them a cease and desist letter months ago, but they'd kept going, thinking I wouldn't notice. Now, with the company bankrupt and an investigation looming, they were out of moves. "You didn't just lose the business," I said, looking at my mother. "You lost it because you bet on the wrong person." My mother's face crumpled. "We can fix this, Dana," she pleaded. "We'll make it right." But her words couldn't erase the years of dismissal, the scholarship they took, the leadership they denied me, the company they handed to Allison. I thought of Joyce's advice, her belief that I deserved better. I thought of my team at Green Essence, the respect I'd earned, the freedom I'd found. Helping them would mean stepping back into their shadow, and I was done with that. "I'm not coming back," I said, my voice final. "You made your choices. Now face them." Allison's jaw tightened, but she didn't argue. My father looked at the floor, his silence a confirmation of his complicity. My mother reached out her hand, trembling, but I shook my head. They left my office, the rain outside mirroring the defeat in their steps. I turned back to my work, a new project waiting on my desk. Starlight Farms was their failure, not mine. I'd built something better, and I wasn't looking back. A few days later, I sat in my office reflecting on Starlight Farms' collapse. I was thriving at Green Essence Markets, my career, a testament to my strength. Starlight Farms, the company I'd once built with my formula, was officially bankrupt. The news echoed through Huntsville. My mother and Allison had run it into the ground with their mismanagement. Their choice to favor Allison, dismissing my contributions, was no accident. It was deliberate, rooted in my mother's belief that only Allison deserved to lead. That truth cut deep, but it also set me free. Their downfall was their own doing, not mine. Joyce, my college friend, had predicted this. Months earlier, she'd spotted irregularities in Starlight's financials, overstated profits, unpaid suppliers, and Allison's reckless spending on flashy, ineffective campaigns. "They're digging their own grave," she'd said over coffee, her voice sharp. I reported it to the state's oversight board. Her action triggered an investigation, and now Allison faced intense scrutiny for questionable financial practices. My mother, once the unshakable matriarch, was buried under debts she couldn't pay, her reputation in ruins. My father, silent as always, shared in their collapse, complicit in their choices. I could have pursued legal action. Starlight had violated my copyrighted drying formula, producing batches without my permission after I left. My lawyer had drafted a cease and desist letter, and I considered suing for damages. But as I sat at my desk, I thought of the years spent fighting for their respect, only to be pushed aside. They were my family, flawed and unfair, and I didn't want to drag them through a courtroom. Instead, I chose to let go. I instructed my lawyer to hold off on any lawsuit. "They've lost enough," I told her, my voice steady. "I'm done with them." Cutting ties with my mother and Allison wasn't easy, but it was final. I wanted no part of their world anymore. The pain of their favoritism lingered. My mother had chosen Allison over me not out of confusion, but because she valued her more. That rejection had fueled my drive to leave, to build something better. At Green Essence, I led with purpose. My office was alive with new ideas, blueberry snacks, apricot bars, all crafted under my direction. My team respected me, their enthusiasm mirroring my own. One afternoon, we finalized a new recipe, and a young chemist high-fived me. "Dana, you're a game changer," she said, grinning. Those words, their trust, meant more than any validation my family could have offered. My days were filled with progress. I mentored my team, sharing techniques I'd honed over years, watching them grow into innovators. Each success, a new product hitting shelves, a customer rave, built my confidence. I wasn't just surviving, I was shaping a future that was mine. My mother and Allison faced the consequences of their actions, debts piling up, investigations closing, and their legacy reduced to ashes. I didn't need to add to their punishment. Walking away was my power. The lesson was undeniable. Your worth isn't tied to your family's approval. It's in the life you create, the work you pour, your heart into, the strength you find within. My mother and Allison made their choices, and they paid the price. I made mine, and it led to freedom. To everyone who's followed my story, thank you for listening. Your support means the world. Maybe you've faced similar struggles with family or fought to prove your value. What lessons have you learned? Share your thoughts, I'd love to hear them.